And we are on air, The Block. I'm Doc Vince, one of your co hosts here. We do this every Friday and we talk about different things which is correlated with blockchain. This is by ICOR BP or International Council of Registered Blockchain Professionals. And with me is my co host for today, or the main host. And we will talk about the blockchain. And she'll introduce our guest for today and the topics. Anyway, let me call on Dr. Tammy Francis.
Hello, how's it going?
Doing good, Dr. Tammy. How are you?
I'm great. It's another Friday on the block, so it's always a good Friday when we're here. And for those of you that are joining us, are like, "What is going on?" It's a little later, Doc Vince, than we normally come on. So yeah, but we are here. So be sure you share this out. Share it out. Yeah. So
And
what's? Go ahead.
no, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna ask. I was just gonna make small talk and say, "Hey, what's new?"
There's a lot of things that are new in the blockchain space, more so in the crypto space, but we're talking about blockchain. Crypto, we have Luna tanking down. Many people are panicking. Bitcoin has been down for almost 7 weeks, but blockchain on the back end, there's a lot of stuff going on. And other than blockchain, we have CBDC. And I want
Yes.
to know more about CBDC. What
Yes, and
is
the,
that?
and the thing you said, this is really not about crypto, like we're talking about blockchain, but today we're going to have to get into that topic. We're going to have to talk about, some of those differences because I think
Mhm.
people get it confused, and so we'll be, going through this and talking about some of those differences. So I think today's a great conversation to, kind of wrap up all that you just mentioned that's
Mhm.
happening in this space and some of the other things that are happening right now. So I think it's going to be a good conversation. So I'm excited.
Yes, this is more important than Amber Heard and Johnny Depp.
You know what? So y'all, this is the block. And on the block, we talk about blockchain, but we also, it's a casual conversation. And so we talk about what's going on in the world. And let me just say, I had no idea what was going on to Johnny Depp until I had my beauty appointment this morning. Like literally, like I just came from my beauty appointment, right? And oh my goodness, she was talking about um like she was talking about Johnny Depp. I was like, what's going on with Johnny Depp? Like I did not know what was going on with Johnny Depp until like an hour ago.
Oh, really?
Apparently, I'm out of the loop. Apparently, I'm too into blockchain and cryptocurrency and metaverse and NFTs and trying to learn more about that stuff that I have been out of the loop about this everyday life stuff. And
You got to
Johnny
be
Depp.
in the loop because every time there's this trending news, there's new coins being created. One time there was a coin about Will Smith and Chris Rock. So it was a Will Smith coin, and then a, a lot of crazy stuff going on. So I don't know. Maybe there will be a Amber Heard Johnny Depp coin. I don't know. Anyway,
Maybe so. Maybe that's when I would have woken up to it because I tell you, I did not know until this morning, like literally an hour ago. Literally an hour ago, she was like, "Yeah, go on YouTube, watch it on YouTube," and I was like,
oh
"Oh,
my
okay." The court
goodness.
case is on. I was like, "Well, okay."
Well, this one is more interesting because that kind of
Yes,
uh, uh, celebrities but let's talk about CBDC. It's not the
CBDCs.
cannabinoid, or I don't know, CBD, but rather
Let's just say, like, I've been using words incorrectly all week, so I guess this is not my week for words. So I am not. I'm gonna hush.
okay, ma'am. So before we call our special guest,
Yes,
let's go to our sponsors. Let's do that.
let's do that.
This blockchain continuing education program is brought to you by our major sponsors: HTML Coin, Utility Coin Beyond the Hype; Altash University, your online school in the fourth industrial revolution; Libra Codes, take control on your NFT creation; and Credence Hub, verified credentials, anytime, anywhere. We also would like to thank our partners.
And so I'll give the full frame to you. Call in our guest, Dr. Tammy.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So, hello everyone. How are y'all doing? I hope you are well. I am Dr. Tammy. I am the director of certification and accreditation for ICOR BP, the International Council of Registered Blockchain Professionals. And today you have just joined us on the block. On the block, the block is about having conversations as it relates to blockchain and the many aspects of blockchain. And we typically try to connect it to the industry and some of the things that you can possibly do in this space and and expose you to the different experts and the professions as it relates to blockchain and in the blockchain industry. So hopefully you have joined us before, but if you haven't, I'm going to invite you to watch one of our previous episodes. Join us on Friday mornings. We're typically here at about 9:15 a.m. Central Time. And so definitely join us today. We're here a little later, but there's always the replay. So you can catch the replay, you can share it out, and especially if we talk about a topic that would interest those that are connected to you, those in your community. And so it's time for us to learn more. So this show is really about education and really started from that point. We have a wide range of audience members. So if you are joining us today and you have expertise, please definitely contribute to the conversation. If you're new, and you have questions, definitely ask those questions and put those in the chat as we talk today. We love to address those either during this live or as we come back and look at the comments on the replay. So I'm going to stop talking now and talking about the show. And let's just talk about, let's talk with our guests. Let's have this great conversation. We have a guest who's not a stranger to the block. We have called on him many times because of his expertise and in different areas. And today we're going to be talking about CBDCs. And so we're just going to bring him on. So Fermin Barrenechea, come on up. Hey there. How's it
Hey,
going?
fine. And again, thank you very much for the invitation to share knowledge with the viewers about CBDCs.
Fermin, now listen. Thank you. You have been on here and you always sharing your amazing knowledge and expertise. So we appreciate you taking time out on another Friday. And I know it's a whole different time zone where you are. So thank you so much for hanging out with us and coming onto the block. So I appreciate you. So let me say that first. So let's tell the folks. So please tell the folks who you are and what you do in case this is their first time joining us and this is their first time seeing you and meeting you. Could you just tell a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. Well, I've had over 18 years of finance background, and that's one of the reasons why when I started learning more about Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, blockchain, over the last 4 years, I concentrated on becoming an advocate, investor, and educator in the field of cryptocurrency and blockchain. Together with a partner of mine, we co founded Musegan Training Academy, where we teach people about the cryptocurrency market and how they can participate in this market, which will continue to grow.
Yes, yes. Yes, I've met your partner and y'all are doing some amazing things, training and educating individuals. And y'all are one of our partners. So thank you so much for joining us and being a part of this educational movement, I guess I would call it, to educate folks and joining us in this effort. So thank y'all so much as a team, as a organization, and of course yourself for coming on the show. So, Doug Vince and I have been kikiing about what's going on in the news and this idea, this concept, CBDCs, and we're using these initials, but some people are probably wondering, what are they talking about? What is it? So could you just tell us what is CBDC?
CBDC stands for Central Bank Backed Digital Currency, which it sounds like a mouthful, but basically what that just means, it's the digital equivalent of fiat. So I think that's the simplest way of putting it. That's the digital equivalent of a government's money.
Ah, so are there different types? Is it just one?
There are well, there are different types depending on how they want to implement it. So for example, the government can say, I only want the CBDC to be at the wholesale level, meaning between central bank and, let's say, the banks.
Right.
Another government might say, I want it between the retail, the investors, the end consumers and the banks. And others may say we want it across all spectrums.
Okay.
So what will differ will be how it's implemented. But
Okay.
what is common across all the models is it is issued by the central bank.
Okay. So now I know just from my just navigating the space, around the people that I know and the spaces that I enter or conversations I have, I know people typically um think of CBDC as a cryptocurrency. So what is the difference between it, or are there similarities between a CBDC and a cryptocurrency? Maybe even a stable coin.
Mhm.
Are there any different, what are the differences and or similarities?
Okay, very good question. I would say it's more of a subset. It's it's not really a crypto. It's a digital currency. The main difference between, let's say, that and a stable coin. Let's use USDT, which is probably the most popular stable coin at the moment, Tether. So in theory, when you say that something is a stable coin, that basically means that for every one token of this cryptocurrency, it is backed by something. It could be fiat, it could be a commodity, it could be another cryptocurrency. But the idea is a stable coin has to be backed by something because that backing is what makes it quote unquote stable, right? At the end of the day, one of the things that cryptocurrency is essentially characterized by is volatility. So the concept of a stable coin came about because they were trying to find a way to address the volatility. So if, let's say, in the case of USDT, every every unit of USDT is supposedly backed by $1. That's the reason why if you look at the movements of stable coins, they will generally fluctuate
Mhm.
only within a very narrow band. Of course, I think as Doc Vince mentioned off air, Luna is a different category altogether. But generally, the stable coins will only fluctuate within a very narrow band. Why? Precisely because it's backed by something that gives it that price stability. Now, but one of the things that you will notice is that for all of these stable coins, none of them are issued by governments.
Mm, okay.
So again, that's going to be your main distinction that a CBDC is always going to be issued by a government. And so second, it's always going to be centralized.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, centralized. So centralized is there's one authority that controls it. Unlike decentralized, there's not one authority that controls it. So yeah. So CBDCs. So what about cryptocurrencies? And so I think you may have answered it, but I just wanted to make sure that we got all three, that we made the difference. So
Well, so you
and I guess my question is, let me ask it this way. Does the CBDC need a blockchain?
yeah, the CBD because the thing is you're still going to be using the same technology. So they would use a blockchain, but more often than not, you would see them gravitating towards a private blockchain because
Okay.
the idea of remember it's a centralized currency. So you may have exceptions or they may find ways to do it on public blockchains, but they will certainly put a lot of safeguards because you're talking about the country's digital money.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. So, so how does CBDCs impact or affect cryptocurrencies and blockchain? Is there any correlation to them being introduced? We talked about governments, and we'll get into more of the implementation in just a moment. But is there any, does it affect them in any way? Since, it may be on a blockchain, it's not a cryptocurrency. So does it affect it in any way?
Well, the impact will be more in terms of Imagine if a government decides to issue a digital currency, then theoretically, a logical next step would be, if you are a believer in a digital currency, then you should have a more positive view of cryptocurrencies in general, correct? So it may not always be the case, but it certainly is a positive first step towards having an open mind going towards adoption of cryptocurrency, some regulations about the space. Because I think for many countries, it starts with that. The only time that you can move forward on having adoption is the government first needs to agree, yeah, we want to look at what can be done in the space. And one of the logical places for governments to start will be a central bank digital currency because it's something that they would control. It would be difficult if it would be difficult for them to agree to enter, let's say, cryptocurrency, and they'll start by, okay, let the private sector do it and we're just going to watch. I'm not saying that's impossible, but chances
Right.
are they'll want to dip their feet into it and see what are the implications, what are the weak points, what are the strong points. Because again, you're talking about the country's money.
Right, right. Yeah. And that idea that you mentioned, control, like that's one thing that's important to the government, we know, right? So what problem does it solve? What are some of the benefits of a CBDC? Are there any? What's the motivation behind countries launching a
Oh,
CBDC?
very good question, Doc Tammy. Well, one, I'll give you one of the simplest ones.
Yeah.
Envision countries wherein, like for example, if you look at the global statistics, we still have literally billions who are unbanked, right? Wherein they have no access to mainstream financial services or instruments. If you had a central bank digital currency, then you now have a way of promoting financial inclusion. So the people who previously wouldn't have been able to avail of banking services or financial services will be able to the moment there is a central bank digital currency.
Wow.
The other thing to look at from a government's point of view is there are cost implications. Remember, when you have to print physical money, right, there's a cost to printing that, security features you need to worry about. But imagine if it was all now digital.
Right.
Certainly, your cost of implementation and the cost of execution will be far, far cheaper.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So, so because and so are there any countries so far, or which countries, I guess I should say, because I do know the answer to this, but which countries have launched a CBDC?
Oh, well, you've had, let's say, the Bahamas, Nigeria has launched one. In fact,
Yeah.
you know what's interesting about what Nigeria did? So they launched the e-Naira earlier this year. But for example, going back to one of the questions you raised, Doc Tammy, one of the things they're actually looking at, right? Because remember, it's a digital currency, so it's basically programmable money. And let's say the government of Nigeria, one of the things that they want to explore is, can they make the digital currency a mandatory vehicle for providing financial assistance to their citizens going forward? That's one of the things they're exploring. Can it be made mandatory in the sense that you'll tell your citizens you've got to use our digital currency if you want to be eligible for any financial assistance that we give going forward?
So is so I'm so I don't know if this is a separate question or the same question. You can answer the same, but I'm going to ask it as it relates to this. We're talking about Nigeria. So is there a problem with that? And I guess the question is also, like, in general with that. Let me do that, because I also want to know, like, in general, what are some of the problems or disadvantages of CBDCs? We talked about some of the benefits, but I do want to talk about the disadvantages of launch of a country launching a CBDC. But in particular, we're talking about Nigeria, and making it mandatory. Like that's a whole nother level, like to whatever the answer is to the first question.
Mm. Well, again, that's not yet confirmed. It's just something
Okay.
that they're deliberating on. But you have to look at it from the perspective of the government, right?
Mhm.
If, let's say, if you were in not just Nigeria, let's say any country, if you wanted to purchase something in that country, you have no option but to use that country's currency, correct?
Correct.
So all they've done now is they've shifted you from physical to
Okay. So
digital,
okay.
right? Now
Right.
the difference though is in fiat, for example, it applies across the board. You can use it for anything. Right now in digital currencies, they're still doing it in tranches, sort of exploring, okay, maybe we'll do it first with this batch of services. Maybe next time we will explore it with this one. Because one of the key questions you did raise, it's not so much a disadvantage, but at the moment, what is lacking
Mm.
is how is it going to be regulated? And
Ah.
you can't really have one size fits all for one simple reason. Regardless of which country we're in, like for example, right now our viewers are listening from different countries. And I'm pretty sure each of those countries has a different position on how they view cryptocurrencies. So depending on how they view cryptocurrencies, that will have an implication on what sort of regulation they would look to introduce to govern something like a CBDC. So that's
Yeah.
your first issue, regulation, because the way that cryptocurrencies are viewed and treated globally varies from country to country.
Right.
The second thing, which is also important, in fact, you've had, let's say, like the United Kingdom, they've done some studies and they're not completely sold on the idea of a central bank digital currency, although they did enter into a 1 year pilot research program with MIT
Ah.
very recently to look at the feasibility. But there are two areas that they cited as areas of concern, which I suppose are areas which will resonate with a lot of countries. The first is cybersecurity, because the thing is, it's on the internet. Even if it's on the blockchain, we've seen centralized exchanges getting hacked. Now,
Mm.
a central bank digital currency is certainly going to be centralized. So, there could be some possible security issues depending on how robust your security system is. That's one. The second has to do with privacy and the ability to track everything that the citizens are doing. That's not something that may sit well with all countries. I mean, it's literally like Big Brother watching every single thing I do. Remember, with fiat right now, yes, they can monitor it, but there's still a number of transactions which they can't monitor,
Right.
right? Because there are just too many
Yeah.
leakages in terms of how the money changes hands, where it goes. The moment you have a digital currency, and if they wanted to be really strict about it in terms of how they implement it, they could literally know each and every transaction you're doing, which
Wow.
raises privacy concerns. That's why a number of countries have still not gotten over that hurdle, because the citizens are not going to be happy with the idea that you know everything I'm doing.
Yes. So privacy, data. Oh my goodness. Like that's yeah. That's a lot, you know. And I because I think that you say that, and I'm thinking, yeah, I don't know if they need to know everything that I'm doing, right? Um, they don't. They don't come. Hello, Doug Vince. Did you have something to add? Come on.
Yes, I really
Okay.
got interested with the CBDC, especially when Fermin talked about the data and privacy, because that's one of those. Some people are see that as a disadvantage for CBDC, because the privacy, data farming, and Big Brother. can see where your money goes, because there's
Yeah.
no way that you could have a CBDC without first a KYC. Then, if it's in a blockchain, every transaction from A to
It's there
wherever Z
forever.
can be tracked. And unlike fiat, they would most criminals would even prefer fiat doing some transaction, because you have to manually
Right.
put some things there. But that's the thing, I guess. Probably one of the disadvantages of CBDC. And what do you think could be the solution to that, for me?
Oh, but before we get into that, Doc Vince, now so it boils down now to how the countries will choose to implement it.
Oh
I'll
yeah.
give you a very good example. China. China has been doing a pilot on a CBDC for over 2 3 years now. And in the case of China, you remember I said you could have levels. It could be between the central bank and the banks. It could be, let's say, between the central bank and the consumers, or the whole 9 yards. China's pilot is the whole 9 yards. They want everything from the banks down to the end users to use it. Now, what were some of the things they did? They spoke to the big digital players like Alibaba, WeChat, and basically they were told, if you accept digital payments, you need to accept our central bank digital currency. Otherwise, we have a problem. So, with one fell swoop, automatically they've got pretty much a nationwide footprint, because
Mhm.
anybody that the major merchants that accepted digital currencies have basically come on board and said, okay, we're going to accept your digital currency. So, that's why I use this as an example, because that's probably not something that, let's say, in the United States, I'm pretty sure they'd have a difficult time pushing that ahead. But in an environment like China, where the government has, let's say, a more authoritarian bent,
Control.
Mm.
they're able to do it. And the citizens, in fact, the citizens aren't complaining. Most of them are like,
Okay.
when like, in fact, what they were doing when they were trying out the pilots, they were like giving the equivalent of, the ang paos, those red envelopes. They were giving away digital envelopes, and people were just falling over each other to be able to get some. So it's a different mindset. So there they don't. I'm sure there are people who have the same concerns, but generally most of the citizenry have fallen in line.
Mm.
When they've done the pilot was not limited to local companies. They've done the pilot in Shenzhen, they've done it in Macau, and they've included foreign companies like McDonald's.
Hmm. Yeah. And that's when you were talking earlier, I was thinking not only is it, your data, the privacy, the security, but also this idea of control. I think I've really looked at that differently since, the pandemic. Since
Hmm.
March of 2020, I look at all of that differently, and the motives and the motivation behind implementing things. What is the purpose? And I think that is something to definitely consider. And so I know, Doc Vince, did we answer your other question? I know you had a question, but we wanted to address that
Yeah, yeah.
first. Okay.
The only thing that got also into my mind is the social credit system of
Mhm.
China, where it can also be used for CBDCs. It depends on your performance or being a good citizen. Then you'll have access to more CBDC, or I don't know. So
No,
Oh,
that's the only
no, sir,
concern with
correct.
CBDC. And
Certainly, because remember, at its heart, it's
mhm,
programmable money.
mm,
yep,
So
and
if somebody wanted to program it so that, like, I'll give you I'll give you a crazy idea. What if I programmed it so that it would only be good for, let's say, 180 days?
mm,
Meaning, even if you wanted to save, oh, no, it's only good for 6 months. You have to spend it.
yeah, you're
I
forced.
could, right? I mean, I'm not saying they would do it, but to the fact that it's programmable money,
mhm.
I can I could do that. so that
Yeah.
even if you wanted to save money, I would have a way of making sure that the economy will keep on churning out product, because you're going to be forced to spend the digital money. You can't save it.
Wow.
Yeah, and then
That,
it will
that's a
bring
whole new perspective to it. Like, oh my goodness, like,
it. Yes, it adds a different and new perspective if we'll try to look at that. And social credit system, if you're not performing well or you're against whatever policy that the government has with CBDCs, can they shut you down? Can they take away your hard-earned money
or limited. Like for
or
those
limit
who
it?
comply, maybe they get 2 years on that, right? But those that don't,
I'm
you
sorry,
either
I'm being
don't get
negative
it
with
or you would get
CBDC.
1 month, and that's all you have access to. Like that could go like this could just yeah. Like for some reason,
Anyway,
I'm feeling Bitcoin is moving up there a little higher now
it is it now.
as we
How
have this conversation.
the question is, will the trend of Bitcoin, how will it affect the price of Bitcoin, the CBDC, once it is being adopted? Where do you see that for me?
The long and short answer to that will be it depends on which country we're talking about, right? Because if you've got countries, let's say, where they do not believe in the CBDC, or they have doubts about the intention, then you will see them going towards the currency which they control instead of the government. So you Bitcoin will be the logical beneficiary of that.
Mm,
I mean, let's look at, it's not CBDC related, but look what happened during the Russia-Ukraine war. When people were having a difficult time having access to their local currency, and let's say in the case of Russia, wherein the ruble
Mhm.
devalued by 20% easily once the war started, what did they do to try and preserve value? They went into Bitcoin,
Bitcoin, yeah, yeah.
because the government couldn't control the Bitcoin.
Yeah. And so, I mean, as we're having this case, that's what I'm thinking. I mean, you're making a case for for my use of Bitcoin just because of the thinking about what what could be programmed, right? And attached to this. So, yeah.
So you're right. So generally, you'd expect, probably, if you do it in phases, you'd probably work first on the CBDC would be used for your basic services. Maybe that's where you start, but that doesn't mean that's where you end,
mm,
Mm,
precisely because it's programmable money. So again, I would say that anything is possible, and it really becomes a function of what is the intention of the government that wants to implement that. Because let's say the governments in Africa would have different objectives, let's say, compared to, let's say, the governments in Europe or in the Americas, for example. Different objectives. So they would have different ways of churning out a central bank digital currency. They would have different modes of implementation. They'd also have different layers that they'd target.
hmm,
yeah. So, and with everything, like I'm, by me being in education, there's always these mandates. There's always these bills passed to implement and mandate educators to do something, and when or a different strategy for improving student success. And so one of the things I know is that implementation makes the difference in in those things, right? So anything that is um top down, implementation is what could either make it or break it. And it sounds like that's the key that I keep hearing this theme today is this is what it is, but it's really about the implementation and where it's being implemented and how it's been implemented. So yeah.
Well, Doc Tammy, Tom Emmer, the US rep, he actually filed a bill. I don't know if it got passed, but he filed a bill basically prohibiting the Federal Reserve from issuing CBDCs to US citizens on account of privacy and surveillance concerns.
Hmm.
He filed the bill in January of this year.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. So
that
y'all stay
I
with
don't
it.
know. That I don't know. Wow, I have to read more about that.
Doc Vince is trying to refrain from researching right
Yeah.
now.
Uh, I'll type it in the
He's
chat
quick to
box.
pull up an article.
Yeah, I'm
Hmm.
supposed to look for that. I have to
I
go.
placed it in the chat box. Look at
Thank you.
Oh, Tom
U.S. Rep
Emmer.
Tom
Yeah,
Emmer.
Tom
He
Emmer. I'm
filed
gonna do
he
that.
filed something in January of this year.
Yeah.
But I don't know at what stage that bill is. Like, was it shut down? Did it go
Mm.
Right.
to the next reading? I don't know. But he filed something precisely because he said, "Oh, we're going to have a problem here with privacy and surveillance." So he wants certain safeguards in place.
I just wow. Wow. So so this brings me to something, because these are things happening. So not only for our audience to stay current on what's going on with your legislation around it and regulation around it that we've talked about today, but what are some other ways that folks can learn more about CBDCs? Do you have any resources, any particular people you follow or you would recommend us follow besides yourself? Of course, we'll get to that in a moment. But is there anything that you would recommend us do to learn more?
Sure. Let me share my screen. Okay.
Okay.
I'll show you this very useful website. One moment.
Doc Vince, he's about to share.
Hmm. And while he's doing that, I'm gonna share this to the screen while waiting for Fermin to share his.
Okay.
It's about that bill, and Senator Ted Cruz also, endorses that one. Senator
So, so it's
introduced
two
some kind
different
of.
bills going on, huh?
Mm.
Wow.
Do you do you see my screen?
I'm gonna get your screen. Add to the
Doc Vince is
screen.
sharing his right now.
CBDC Tracker. Yep, it's up there.
Right. Now
Atlantic
you look
Council.
right. If you see this, right. Now this website is very good, and I'll scroll down so you can see why I like this website. If you want to know about CBDCs, see, it gives you a global snapshot. There's a colored legend chart here. So you can see basically pretty much most of it is colored except for this chunk here. But pretty much that means everything is in some form of evaluation. And I think here's the important thing to highlight, which we talked about earlier. And let me read it because it might be too small there. Without new standards and international coordination, the financial system may face a significant interoperability problem in the future. So that's why I pointed out regulations and how they are implemented will have an impact on this. Why? Because, for example, country A has their CBDC, then they'll say, "Oh, if you want to deal with us, you've got to pay with my CBDC." Country B will say, "Well, why will I use your CBDC when I have my CBDC?" Right?
Mm.
So there's got to be some sort of meeting of the minds in terms of an appropriate settlement mechanism. But the other reason why I like this website is here on key findings. It just gives you a very good snapshot. 87 countries representing over 90% of global GDP are exploring a CBDC. And if you want to contrast it, in May of 2020, there were only 35 countries. So in 2 years' time, it's more than doubled.
Hmm.
Nine countries have already fully launched, Nigeria being the latest one.
Yeah.
How
And
about
then,
how
yeah,
about in Asia? How about Singapore or in the Philippines? Was
well,
it canceling in
here
the
you've
Philippines?
no, they're studying it. Here, uh, let's scroll. Malaysia has a pilot. Cambodia, it's under development.
Hmm.
Thailand, it's a pilot. Singapore, it's a pilot.
Mm.
Philippines, research. Indonesia, research. China, pilot. So it's very good. See, because I don't know if you can see it well on the screen, but if you notice, it tells you pilot, it tells you what type, it tells you are they going for wholesale, retail, or both. You notice in China it says both.
Hmm.
If I were to go, let's say, to here, Malaysia, you notice it says wholesale, which means he's only looking at the banks. So that's why I go back to, let me stop the share for now. But that's why I go back to the what China wants to do is truly ambitious because he wants to cover the whole 9 yards.
Hmm.
Everybody else is looking to do it either A or B. China wants to do it A plus B plus C,
Going all the way and then some.
all the way. But again, that is possible because of the way the government is set up and how they deal with their citizens. You wouldn't, you certainly wouldn't be able to do it
Right,
that way in the United States.
right. Because it needs a lot of legislation coming
Yes,
from different parties, Congress, you got Senate before it can be implemented. Unlike in China, if Prime Minister, I forgot his name,
Xi Jinping.
Xi Jinping, if he says let's do this, then
it's
definitely
it's
that's
done.
it. It'll be implemented all throughout China and even to other countries. I'm sorry.
Yeah, yeah, because that's they lead, right? They
They
lead.
lead. Anyway, yeah, go. I'm gonna give back the floor to you, Dr. Tammy, and
Well, and
that was just
hang out with us, because so either one of you, like any final thoughts, anything that we want our audience to make sure they consider, think about, look into more, do a little more research around. Is there any final thoughts?
As I said, the thing with CBDC is clearly there's still going to be a lot of developments going forward depending on which country you're in. I know that doesn't really provide a lot of clarity, but that's the reality. Depending on which country you're in, there will be implications on if and how they would implement a CBDC. So, as just to reiterate, that AtlanticCouncil.org website was the site I showed. It's a very good resource material if you want to know more about central bank digital currencies from a global perspective. And it'll tell you what stage of development it is depending on the country you click on. It's pretty comprehensive, a very good resource for those who want to know more about CBDCs.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you so much. So, how can folks connect with you? How can they follow you? How can they maybe even join Musagan and what y'all are doing there? How can we connect with you?
Well, they can, quickest way to connect with me will be through LinkedIn, Fermin Barrenechea. And then if they've got questions about this or other things, I'll endeavor to answer as quickly as possible. And if I don't know, I'll research.
Yeah, we'll find the answer. So, Doc Vince, any final thoughts? That's all I have for today.
well. That's all I have. Also, I mean, this is a very interesting topic, CBDC, on its importance, because I see a lot of countries like Fermin has been saying, he's into thinking about CBDC. But for me, maybe my thoughts are once CBDC is used or approved, you'll see a big movement of adoption of cryptocurrencies. Because once we have that kind of regulation being there approved, it'll be easier for cryptocurrencies to be adopted in mainstream. And I'm just waiting for this one, because that would be for me a big leap for Bitcoin to the moon.
No, I agree. I agree. I think that should there be regulations on a CBDC, cryptocurrency will follow.
Yeah.
Yes, and yeah, before anything else, to our audience, Dr. Tam and Fermin, if they want to learn more about our other topics we've been talking about, we've been having several topics already, and one of the topics that we had when Fermin was a guest was this DeFi or decentralized finance,
Right.
and I'll put it either way, left or right, on our screen for them to go through and watch that video. I don't know. It depends after this one.
It
You
depends
know,
on the platform, right? It
it
depends
depends
on
on the
which
platform.
platform you're watching us.
Yes. If it's in Facebook, probably right there, or YouTube. Either way, it'll be on the screen and the link will be there. And our other shows. Anyway, yeah, take us out, Dr. Tam.
Thank you. Thank you both. Thank you, Fermin, for joining us today. Thank you so much for being here. Y'all definitely connect with him on LinkedIn. Make sure you follow him, see some of the amazing things he's doing in this space. And because that may give you an idea of what you can do in this space as well. We talk about professions. So I don't want to negate or neglect to talk about that and share that. Like you can just, the people we have on here, even if we're talking about a certain topic, make sure you follow them because you can see what they're doing and seeing what are some of the possibilities in the blockchain technology space. Thank you both. Thank you all for joining us. Please like, subscribe, make sure you turn on your notifications so you can get a notification on Fridays when we come live and share with you more topics around blockchain technology and the things that are buzzing in the news, because we get into that too. So I think today we got into it a little more than normal, but definitely check that out. Thank you for joining us on the block, where we have conversations about those things that are important in the blockchain industry. So thank you all. I'll see you soon. I am Dr. Tammy, and that's my co-host,
Doc Vince.
Doc Vince, and our guest today.
Thanks again for the invite, and we look forward to seeing you again in the future.
Thank you all. Y'all have a
Thank
good
you all.
weekend.
And
Take
we're
care.
not going to talk about Johnny Depp or Amber Heard. Just search there.
No, but you can look at that on your own. Like I say, we talk about some of everything. It's casual around here. So
Bye-bye. Stay
we're
safe.
on the block.
This blockchain continuing education program is brought to you by our major sponsors: HTML Coin, Utility Coin Beyond the Hype; Altash University, your online school in the fourth industrial revolution; Libra Codes, take control on your NFT creation; and Credence Hub, verified credentials, anytime, anywhere. We also would like to thank our partners: